Good morning, everyone. We are starting very shortly. We're waiting for a few people getting coffee, but I'm sure they can walk in as they bring in their coffee. I'd like to start by welcoming our honored guest today, retired Major General Chanakira. Thank you for being with us yesterday and sacrificing yet another day of your precious time. To senior government officials present, HDC Chairman Stanley Harry, HDC CEO Linda Nielsen, captains of industry and distinguished guests. Thank you for joining us on our second day of our inaugural Horticulture Investment Forum. Yesterday, we had very interesting presentations covering a range aspects of challenges and potential solutions. We also had many presentations from our new partners, Zimtrade. We have solidified our relationship with them by the signing of an MOU and look forward to a constructive journey together promoting Zimbabwe's horticulture. Just a brief recap on some of the major points that came up yesterday. The retention threshold is threatening the viability of the industry. This was very strong and came strongly through all of the presentations. The need for patient capital for us to be investing in longer-term crops that have increased profitability. Profitability of longer-term crops and value addition also came up very strongly. The hub and spoke, how to implement and incentivize the hub and spoke for a sustainable increased production. These are all key points that came up from yesterday, and today we hope to go deeper within the discussion and not just focus on the challenges that we face, but come up with viable solutions to ensure increased and sustainable production. With that, we shall be starting our first panel discussion. It will be moderated by Tatenda Marume of Zimtrade, and I will let him introduce the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Chieza, and a very good morning to you all. It's good to be with you again today. I think we must all admit that yesterday we had some very interesting discussions, and a number of key issues came to the surface. Some of them she has highlighted when she was giving us a rep of what happened yesterday, but also the issue of logistics. Whether it was Unaiswa talking about the roads and the infrastructure that we have and the need for cold chain facilities, or whether it was Liam crunching the numbers, talking about how we compare to our regional competitors in terms of the cost of logistics. It was quite interesting, to learn that in most cases, the cost of logistics is about 50 to 55% of your revenue. So it means that this is an important aspect of our businesses, and hence the need to give it ample time, to discuss and to dissect this issue even further. So without talking much, we have a stellar lineup in terms of our panel today. The only unfortunate thing is that it is gentlemen only. But everything else, I think we are sorted. So I will introduce you, and as I introduce you, you can then walk and take your seat at the podium. We have Phil Chapman from Kosho. Phil is a seasoned logistics practitioner with a lot of experience in our market and the global landscape in general. Maybe we can clap hands for him as he comes to the podium. I think you're going to clap even more after he gives us his wisdom and solutions to what we are going to be discussing here. We have Mr. Tafadzwa Zaza, who is the manager, ground handling and airport services from Air Zimbabwe. So we also have an airliner. And again, let's clap hands. We are still, it's still early, so we expect the energy to be still there. Only 2 more times for you to clap as we introduce Tongai Munyaradzi from NHS. He is the cargo manager. Then last but not least, I think it's also good to have the farmers' experience so that we also get to know what they are going through and the opportunities that they see in this particular area. So I'd like to introduce Pete Brayston from Dodd Hill. It's always a tongue twister for me when I try to say his full name. But as they are making themselves comfortable, just to say a few things. I think we are living in unprecedented times. COVID has just changed the way that we do business, and logistics has not been spared. Right now, we are in the middle of a supply chain crisis, where you find that containers are just heaped in the wrong places. There are backlogs at the ports, and the experts are predicting that it might be a while before things get back to normal. The same can also be said about air travel. I was just learning that 50% of air freight goes through passenger airlines. So, with the disruptions that were happening, it also means that somehow our logistics was also disrupted. So we have an hour to dissect this issue and come up with solutions. I think that was the mandate that we have been given. So this is how we are going to structure it. The first 20 minutes, which will be 5 minutes for each, you are going to give us your submissions in terms of the challenges and the solutions. We are going to have another 20 minutes where we do some cross-examination, interrogation of some of the issues that you would have highlighted. And then the last 20 minutes, we are then going to open it up to the floor so that we have a wholesome discussion and make sure that we capture input from everyone else. So I'll start with the farmer. Pete, what do you see as the challenges and the solutions with regards to logistics of horticulture in Zimbabwe?
Thanks, Tatenda. Morning, everyone. I'm sitting here with a whole lot of air freight guys. The space I'm in, citrus, doesn't generally handle air freight costs. So I would only basically be talking about sea freight and road freight as it applies, or how we view it applies to citrus in the current context. As you're all aware, this last season has been, if not disastrous, it's been very challenging, particularly in the citrus space with South African ports being very congested, lack of containers coming into South Africa for transshipment of fruit out of Southern Africa, and by extension Zim as well. The South African port system currently is under huge pressure. I don't know if any of you have been following on some of the issues there, but essentially the presentation, which was done by the Chief of Logistics of the CGA of Southern Africa, pointed out that there'd been no recapitalization in Portnet for approximately 10 years, and a lot of the equipment was now obsolete and starting to fail. So already there's a challenge in terms of future exports and volumes going through South African ports. And I think it's important we understand that. While obviously they're not going to fall in the sea, there's going to be congestion. and it's going to be a constricted export chain. In terms of citrus, obviously markets that Zim are able to access would be North America, Canada in particular, Europe, Russia, all the ex-Eastern European states, more recently in the Far East, Malaysia, Indonesia, India is potentially coming on board, Philippines potentially coming on board, China, we're in the throes of finalizing protocols for some varieties. So in many respects, the Far East looks like a very probable and strong destination for Zimbabwean fruit. And that would also include the Middle East, into Jeddah and Dubai. In view of the South African congestion, what is definitely necessary from a Zim perspective, and we have a lot of time in which to remedy these things, because orchards' first production will only be starting next year on a tentative basis of any future volume. So we have probably 3 to 4 years to get our ducks in a row. But essentially, we need to get the Beira corridor up and running again. It was touched on yesterday. It would be the shortest route, and if we could get dedicated, particularly into Middle East and near Far East markets with dedicated fruit ships, would be the way forward. Obviously, issues with Beira port are shallow port issues which would need to be looked at. It's all long-term. I have had contact with some of our government ministries. They're indicating the potential for a big iron and steel export terminal in or around close to Beira, which obviously, in terms of potential rail in the future, would be an option for Zim citrus. So that conversation is on the table at the moment, very early days, so we will follow up on that one. The other one that has been mooted is a Rutenga link, putting in a cold store at Rutenga, and then rail shipping through to Maputo, which again would be a good option for Zimbabwean fruit. And the other one, obviously, which hasn't been used, would be Walvis Bay in Namibia. And again, we would urge the government authorities to, and I know there was a recent visit by the president. I believe he was having conversations with the Namibian counterparts, and we would see value in using their ports for shipping into Europe and North America. And again, those links need to be set up and the logistics chain worked on in the next 2 to 3 years to capacitate fruit that will be going particularly into the northern hemisphere, and for the Beira Maputo link going into the Far East and Middle East. Not to say that we obviously will continue to use South African ports. That is the only option we currently have. The current model for Zim fruit going out of South African ports, again, a little bit constricted. Fruit goes to Joburg and repackaged into reefers there and then onto port for loading is the one option, obviously, which bears cost because of the trans-shipping area issue. The other one goes to a cold store which is dedicated to Zimbabwean fruit only because of phytosanitary issues, is Hammanskraal, which is, I'm not quite sure, 40 to 60 kilometers from port. Again, incurs a big reloading cost component onto the fruit. So you can see the South African ports, while they've always dealt with Zim fruit, are not the most efficient, and distance to port obviously is a massive issue. So the conversation with our neighboring countries to give us short links and to set up cold facilities in port are absolutely key to the success of a future large volume citrus industry, which we can see coming. Right, basically that's an overview of where we're at. As I said, there are problems. Of course, they will be met. From a road logistics point of view, the traffic has been coped with by and large. There have been issues with shortage of southbound traffic. We cannot run trucks empty into Zim and then fill them to load them back. The costs will be prohibitive. So we're dependent on loads coming into Zim and backloading at concessionary rates back to port. So again, it's dependent on Zim's overall economy to ensure there's a flow of inbound traffic to allow our exports to flow at costs which are sustainable from a grower point of view. I think that sort of concludes where we're at. There's a lot of work needs to be done. I would suggest in fairly short order that some sort of a consulting be set up, particularly with the Beira corridor, which we used to have in the past, and then a relook at the Rutenga-Maputo link as a potential, and communication with the Namibians in Walvis Bay to set up dedicated fruit handling facilities and to encourage the shippers to come in there to handle that cargo. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. I know I said 5 minutes, but I think the content was just coming in. So, a little bit more. But I think it was quite interesting, some of the options that you have just indicated there. I think we have to come back and interrogate them further. But right now, allow me then to give the podium to Phil. Phil, you are the one who's responsible for taking the project now. I know your perspective will be even wider because you are dealing with quite a number of products as well. So what's your take, Phil, on the challenges and opportunities in Zimbabwe?
Good morning, everyone. Just to add to that, very specific with regards to citrus, when you start talking fruit, as in stone fruit and things like peas, you've got to consider what is the last port of call before the ship transgresses to Far East or Europe. So for us, Cape Town has to be, if you're going into Europe, the final port of call, which makes Walvis interesting as long as we can get consistency of ships through there. One ship every 2 weeks is not going to help the vegetable and the stone fruit industry. Just to expand on that one, from an air freight point of view, rates have gone up consistently over the last COVID period, and it doesn't look as though that's going to change in the near future. As long as vaccines are paying 4 times what fresh produce is paying, we're going to have constraints on trying to beat prices down with airlines. And it's always going to be held in our face that we're doing you a favor to come to Zimbabwe to collect it. We could go and collect much higher paying cargo in other places. But they also realize, the airlines, that COVID's not going to be here forever. And at some point they're going to need us in the future. I'm very concerned about consistency of supply, particularly from the only cargo airline coming into Harare at the moment. And my understanding of what the problem is, and you can't find it, but yeah, blueberries are filling a role, but that's only in August when the freight goes back to the Kenyans. It's a difficult equation, and I don't know what the solution is. That's about it for me, eh?
Oh, that was sure, but also precise. I think I love the consistency in terms of the issues. So at least there's understanding between the farmer and the logistics guys. But maybe we need to hear more from the airline. So, Mr. Zaza, what do you see as the challenges and the solutions, especially in light of what Phil just said?
Thank you, Tatenda. Good morning, everyone. We understand if we have challenges, there are no challenges without solutions. And we need to see opportunities during challenges. As a national airline, we were affected by the COVID pandemic. However, during this COVID pandemic, because we are both passenger and cargo airline, the passenger side dropped, but during that period we were able to operate flights that were doing repatriation for passengers all over. At the same time, we managed to carry a lot of cargo, especially using our 767, going as far as China, the vaccines and so forth. So, but for this produce that we are talking about, yes, in Zimbabwe we have seen a number of freighters coming in and out, which means there is a cargo. And right now, there is an opportunity for all of us to set aside the competition that we used to have, right from the farmers. We have got well-established farmers already and the upcoming farmers. And there's a chain in the delivery from the farmers, the carriage, and to the last destination. Now we need to collaborate. That's the opportunity to collaborate. For Air Zimbabwe, through the government support, I think it's in our plan to convert one or two of our aircraft into freighters, which we have. One of them is the 767 and the 777. We are planning to convert into a freighter, which means some of the challenges that we have, especially on the pricing, that will affect, like you said, the negotiating power right now is on the weaker side. But if we have a national airline with a freight, I think because for us as Air Zimbabwe, we are a Zimbabwean registered company under the government of Zimbabwe. There is no way we will charge all our rates in Forex. There will be an opportunity for even the farmers or the producers to pay in local currency, part in US dollars to cover for these foreign expenses. So the opportunity now is to collaborate. Let's set aside the competition that we were in before COVID. And I can see the passenger side to come back to normalcy. It will take a bit of a long time. But we can capitalize on the freight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zaza. I think you ended on a very positive note in terms of the plans that you have as Zim. But I think you work closely with the NHS. So to complete the story, it will also be good to hear from Mr. Tonkai Munyaradzi. Mr. Munyaradzi, again, in light of what the others have said, what are the challenges and the possible solutions to these challenges that we are facing?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tatenda. As NHS, we are there to provide the facilities for cargo movements at the airports. So we work closely with Phil and Zaza. For the cold rooms, we rely a lot on Phil. However, we notice that this industry is also growing and it intends to grow very fast. So we are also putting up cold rooms at our facilities to cater for the excess or the extra loads that will be coming in. As a strategy, National Handling Services will be building a cargo facility at Victoria Falls Airport that will also have cold room services there. And also at Bulawayo, we also realize that in the coming few years after the dam completions that are taking place, citrus production might be on the rise in the southern part of the country. So we are not looking only at Harare as the exit point. So we are setting up for those facilities at those various airports. We are also looking at Victoria Falls because currently the airlines that are coming into to Victoria Falls are not carrying any cargo, maybe that would be an area where you can negotiate a cheaper price because of that utilization of space out of Victoria Falls. We are planning to have Lufthansa next year, and also there's currently Ethiopian Airlines is flying out of there. So they are coming in with passengers only and no cargo, and also leaving with no cargo at all. So that is an area where the airlines are complaining that the revenues are very low. Harare, yes, the passenger loads and the cargo loads are a bit balanced. So those are new areas that we might also need collaboration with you to utilize those facilities. Then coming on to the citrus that was mentioned here, let me say I'm one of the luckiest persons this week to have been invited to this conference. Zimbabwe is set up a dry port at Walvis Bay, and as National Handling Services, we were tasked to operationalize that port. In the last 2 years, we have been working on that dry port. Now it has been operationalized. However, we are planning to launch a roadshow to the stakeholders who are going to assist us in setting up what is needed or what you farmers would require to be set up at that dry port. I hear you need cold rooms. We are not experts in that area, but with your assistance, we can actually set up a Zimbabwean thing at the dry port, and we are planning to manage it in 2 ways. There will be offices in Walvis Bay and offices in Zimbabwe for logistical issues. So during that roadshow that we will be launching next year, we expect your contribution is to find ways of making that port more operational and more Zimbabwean. And it was set up to solve the Zimbabwean access to the sea challenge. And it is now up to our collaboration between yourselves and us to make sure that this thing, it can cut the operational cost for you, and also we can gain as a country from that platform. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Munyaradzi. I think you highlighted quite a number of positive issues, the plans that you have. But at this point, I'll come back to Pete and put you on the spot. We are fortunate to be graced by the presence of retired Major General Chanakira here. From what I know of him, he's a man of action. Even his background will tell you that he's a man of action. So with all these issues and the options that you have indicated, Beira, Walvis Bay, and Maputo, what would you say to him are the action points that you would need to implement? And also, we have, I think we have the financial institutions also available, whether they have a role to play. I don't know how you see the role that the different stakeholders that are here can play to make sure that we can make this happen.
Thanks, Tatenda. I would say the way one would tackle this would be initially from a citrus grower perspective would be to quantify the loads on a per annum basis going forward, split up into a monthly breakdown with probable or potential destinations, so we know what volumes we're going to be dealing with over the next 5 to 10 years. From there, we would need to find out from the shipping lines, and that was alluded to by Phil, is that whether that sea traffic would avail itself to call at these ports. So one would need to talk to CMG and Maersk and whoever else does this traffic, and then also to determine whether it would be container traffic or whether it would be straight break bulk, in which case it would be, for example, citrus fruit would be sent ambient, refrigerated at port, and then loaded. Those conversations need to be discussed with the shipping lines, freight forwarders. And then on the bulk of the logistics, as I said, would be a CGA exercise to quantify the build-up going forward. There's already a considerable volume through Bike Bridge, and obviously if one could give them better rates and freight costs, it would be a no-brainer. There's already volume there, and they are all into the South African logistics chain. But I think anyone would readily move if they're going to get better and lower prices. So in a nutshell, that's what we need to do. We need to have the conversation with the buyer port authorities. Munyaradzi mentioned we've already got a point of call in Walvis Bay, which is a massive positive, because I think it won't just be fruit that's going out of there. It'll be a lot of other traffic northbound out of Zim that can go through that dry port. And then Maputo is another conversation, because it's going to require rail and cold store all the way to port, probably a much bigger cost build-up than the two that are already on the table. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. I think Pete it was clear in terms of what needs to be done. And to Linda and the team at HDC, I think it's also about implementing and make sure that the stakeholders that Pete was talking about are brought together and we can map a way forward. Then Mr. Zaza and Mr. Munyaradzi spoke about some interesting plans that are coming from the respective organizations that they represent. And I know they also affect you, Phil, and definitely they also affect the industry as a whole. What's your feeling towards the issues that Mr. Zaza and Mr. Munyaradzi presented?
All very welcome. NHS desperately needed that cauldron at Harare Airport, and I'd heard about the development of it, and it's a very positive development. And I think will help them support Ethiopian Airlines, because the weakest part of Ethiopian Airlines is the cold chain forward from departure from Harare Airport. And by getting a cauldron into Harare Airport, it's very interesting. Victoria Falls is an interesting one because for new airlines like Lufthansa and what have you, I see an opportunity. It's a long way from Harare to try get product up to Victoria Falls. And same thing again, you're going to have to dead leg back to Bulawayo to find a load to bring back to Harare. It would suit the guys down in the Bulawayo area to look at opportunities out of, but for us guys up in Harare, I think it's just a little bit too far. And you can access the same airlines, bar Lufthansa, from Harare Airport. And if Ethiopia's going to give a deal to Victoria Falls, then surely they can give us the same deal in Harare. But I think well worth having a cauldron up there for the guys down in the northern part of the country to supply up through there.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. But while you're still there, I have an extra question as well. I think over the past week, we saw the interest around issues to do with the environment. COP26 was happening in Glasgow. And I think there's a trend that has been happening even before COP26 with regards to the environment, where we see that there is now more pressure from the market for the industry to migrate to ocean freight. Well, it's cheaper as well, but in terms of the environment, what are the prospects of us being on time in terms of that migration, or whether it is necessary for us to even make sure that we push more through ocean freight?
The only way forward in being competitive in the industry is to start accessing sea freight. It's the cheapest way of getting your product there. And from what I can see, more and more product is going to end up going by sea freight. For us, the challenge is going to be going through South Africa, container supply and all the rest of it. We need to be at the port of last call for the ship shelf life on a P by sea freight, 46 days, and you've pushed your luck too far. We need product to be there in 30, 32 days maximum. And that's probably the biggest constraint. And unrest in South Africa, I mean, the effects of the week of free shopping in South Africa was disastrous. And I think that the citrus guys changed to Cape Town because of the disruption in Durban, and the pea guys got shifted off the ships in favor of South African citrus and all the rest of it. So it's very volatile. And one thing I've learned with sea freight, one thing goes wrong, and it's a disaster in that sea freight chain. It's just a disaster. The shelf life is the shelf life. As soon as you go past that shelf life, port disruption, port nets decided to go on strike, delays at the border because they've introduced a new charge. All of these things delay the process. So the management of the logistics all the way to Cape Town is probably the hardest part of the sea freight equation.
Well, it's difficult, but it is necessary. We have to do it one way or the other. So earlier on we were discussing about the airlines that are coming into Zimbabwe. So I don't know, maybe whether it's NHS who can attempt to answer my next question, whether the issue of lowering landing fees is going to be beneficial. Is it going to bring in more airlines and we benefit from that, or what's the possibilities in line with that?
Thank you very much, Tatenda. I think, yes, the issue of lowering landing fees could be part of the solution. However, the challenge that the airlines are actually facing is the passenger volumes. Yes, we might have many airlines coming, but if they are going to be operating at below 65% capacity for the better part of the year, there will still not be consistency. For example, you'll find the airlines coming in, they put in a schedule for the year. Sometimes they reduce the flights during the low season, because in the airline industry we've got generally 3 peak seasons. We've got the mid-November to mid-January period, then we have got mid-March to mid-May period, then we've got the mid-July to mid-September period. So these are the periods that the airlines will be fully loaded, and during the other periods the airlines are flying empty. So the passenger loads also have got a lot to probably this will be solved when we become a middle-income economy, where we will have more people with more money in the pockets to travel. But to lower ground handling charges alone, when you actually don't have the volumes, is still a challenge. And this can also be affecting the farmers, the movement of goods as well, because when the airlines now reduce the flights because the passenger loads are low, it means the cargo movement is also affected. So on the cargo side, I think having a freighter or a freight cargo airline in the country could actually mean we have got a consistent movement of cargo, whether the air passenger side is low or high. And also, with some of the airlines, the cold chain facilities on the transit points are not very good. So sometimes it will be a risk to say, of course we've got many airlines, but our cargo, how is it transiting at certain points? So we need also to know which airport has got the best cold chain facilities for our produce if we are to use indirect services. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think I'll be asking Mr. Zaza the last question to round up this this section on logistics. But maybe in the meantime, we can prepare, for the question and answer segment. I hope there are some roving mics around, because we also want to hear from the floor. So, Mr. Zaza, you spoke about converting, one of the planes into a freighter. So again, I'm going to put you on the spot and try to make you preempt your plans. Do you have any particular destinations in mind? Maybe if you can explain further why you have selected those destinations.
Okay, thank you very much. With the freighters now, the issue is when you have got a freighter, you don't necessarily have a permanent schedule in terms of destination. It is now that relationship between the airlines and the market who are pushing the product. You can operate your freighter on ad hoc basis, maybe, but you can come up with a sort of a schedule which is, say, per fortnight. You say you are going to take freight into, for example, Dubai every fortnight. Then that will be a scheduled freight. But when it lands in Dubai, you can even operate somewhere else before it comes back to base with a freight. Currently, we are planning to operate into China. That's our first international destination that we are planning to. Then there are other European destinations that we are targeting. But at the same time, we are saying, while we are pursuing that, we can still operate our current aircraft for cargo without passengers, like we have been doing when we were uplifting vaccines from China. With our 7.6, we can carry up to 30 tons of cargo currently. So we are saying we can still do it right now to say if we want to move our cargo to a particular destination, we can come, we can sit down and agree, then we can do it. The advantage is it takes even shorter to transport cargo if it's a direct flight. Some of the flights that operate with the technical stops, that's where it will now end up being more expensive because it will go via certain destinations and it takes longer and transfers. But if you have got direct operations into particular destinations that will be chosen or identified by the suppliers, that will make it easy.
Thank you for that. He spoke about China, so it means all those issues to do with the protocols, they have to be priority because they are opening up on the logistics, but we also have to open it up in terms of other market access issues. So at this point, I would like to open the floor for any questions or any additions to what the gentleman here expressed. Yes, Mr. Harry. I don't know if we have a mic. Yes.
I think my first question is as an industry, we welcome. Hello?
Yeah.
I was saying my first question is directed at Mr. Zaza. We're very much excited about your decision to convert one of your 767 and 777 aircrafts into freighters. That's definitely good news for the industry. But do you have a time frame for that? It will assist us in planning the way forward. Then the second question is directed at, I think it's basically the whole team except maybe Peter. Freight rates out of Zimbabwe are the most expensive in the region. You know it. We need, as an industry, to determine why those rates are that high in comparison to the entire SADC region. Without addressing that issue, even if we go for open skies policy and whatever, they will remain high. Yes, COVID has hit us, but we're not the only one. Kenya has been equally hit. Zambia has been hit. South Africa has been hit. Why is it that the rates out of South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, you name it, are much lower than out of Harare? And I think this is the platform to deal with that issue and deal with the fundamental causes, issue that is causing our rates to be out of kilter with the rest of the players in the region, because it's compromising the competitiveness of the industry. For your own information, marginal projects that we used to export, like baby corn, we have stopped. Why? Because of for viability reasons. Leatrice flowers, we have stopped. Why? Because of viability reasons. Proteas. So what we effectively that is doing to the industry is we're reducing our product range. And I think it's an issue that needs urgent attention. I've talked about rates, I've talked about that one. And the third issue. Sorry, if I remember, I'll come back to it, yeah. But maybe.
Yeah. Maybe if we can have another question before we. Yeah, Joe here has got a question.
My question is more of a information than Phil, who's involved with sea freight. I sit on the same desk as Pete does, and we basically have one of the highest volumes of produce leaving this country, but we're also the lowest value of produce leaving this country. And to us, logistics is a major part of our cost reduce. A couple of things. We're very excited, and we heard that China sort of given us a protocol to sign. But on reading that protocol, I suddenly lose excitement because they want us to drop our temperatures of our fruit down to -0.6 at our packhouse. Now, for us to install that and put it together, now basically puts a major cost onto our citrus. Plus, if we move our oranges and lemons in that, it increases our cost of over 40% of transport just to get it to the port. Whereas if we stick to the old system where we set it on a flat deck all the way to Durban and then it is put into Goldsteri, it looks viable. The other thing that I want to ask Phil, who sits on these boards and meets with all the container people, is we have been always looking at the Beira corridor, but it doesn't attract the big ships. We need our fruit, as Phil mentioned, to basically get to our port of destination as quickly as possible. Maputo has been pushed by the Citrus Growers Association for a number of years, and the citrus growers in the northeast of South Africa for 2 or 3 years moved it there, but then they stopped because of the cost and the delay. They would pick the fruit up in Maputo and take it all the way back to Durban and then transship it onto a bigger ship, would then take it all the way off to the east. That is basically, we're not achieving what we want, is to get our fruit there. It's a perishable product, it's live, and it's starting to deteriorate from the day it leaves, we pick it. So we've got to get there as quickly as we can. Now, Maputo is attracting me quite strongly because we have all the guys in the northeast of South Africa who need to move their fruit to Maputo. And if we can basically connect with Maputo through Ritenga, but Ritenga's got nothing. It's got a railway line, but there's nothing there. And I'm sort of probably also aiming at our chairman of the horticultural growth group, General sitting there, that basically we need to do something at Ritenga so that basically the container comes into Ritenga and the container goes out. I don't know what the cost would be, but it seems logical. It's probably more of a comment, but I'd like Phil to take note. He sits on those boards and or communications, and that is something that we, the Citrus Association, we're excited about the China Protocol, but it's looking dead in the, before it even goes. For us in the north, it doesn't look viable. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I hope Phil, you've understood his question, or maybe it's just a comment for you with regards to the Maputo route. So maybe back to Mr. Harry's questions. The first one to Mr. Zaza in terms of the time frames for this conversion. And then this one is, I think, for all in the panel to just have a comment in terms of the freight rates. If I heard it well, there is something that we need to do here in Zim, because we are also facing challenges like any other country, but our rates are higher than all those other countries. So there has to be something that can be done internally for us to have competitive rates. So I'll start with Mr. Zaza.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the question. Yes, on the conversion, it's in our strategic plan. And as an airline, we have started the engagement with our shareholders as well as stakeholders to map a way forward. As you are aware, this conversion requires some identification of the company that will do the conversion, as well as the money that is involved. But it's there, and it will be communicated to the industry very soon once we have a clear time frame. If I can, I can go ahead and touch on the issue for the rates that he has also talked about. On that one, like I said before, I am sure the high freight rates, they need the involvement of everyone, because it's a chain. It starts with maybe I can say freight companies that they do also the logistics. They also have their charges. You go to the ENDRA, NHSEM, our brother, they charge their also, they put their charge also. The transporter, whether it's an airline or road or sea, they also put their charge. And the airport authorities, in terms of taxis, they also put their charges. Combining those, the rate becomes high. So we need, like I said, we need to collaborate, come together. Yeah. Everyone must play a part. If you come to the table and everyone play a part in reducing these rates, we will come up with a better rate which will benefit every player of this industry. That's my take on that.
Thank you. Phil, what's your take on these issues?
It's very tough to understand how, with the development of the industry, which is inclined to do more and more sea freight, where our negotiating power is going to come from to drive air freight prices down. We're already losing half the pea crop to sea freight. Go back 5 years, sea freight was nowhere. We did 78 sea freight containers from Harare Airport this year. If that had gone by air, the negotiating power is completely different, but it's going by sea now. So that, and then blueberries goes in. I'm not a big blueberry person, but blueberries more and more towards sea freight as well. Yes, there's a window. Yes, there's an early window for peas, and I think that on blueberries it's pretty much the same thing. There's a window for air freight, but the airlines are going, well, you want our support in those times, pay for it. You're going cheap sea freight. That's where you're getting your return. You've got to pay for the air freight because you're not consistently supplying it. I'm not saying that it's unsolvable. I'm not saying that it's a dead end. It's not negotiation, room for negotiations. The hope would be that as things change and things start to settle down and possibly airlines start coming back to Harare Airport, maybe we can get British Airways back to Harare Airport. Maybe Air Zimbabwe can start flying to London on a consistent basis. And you made reference to freighters can fly once in a while when there's load. With these guys out here, they need consistency of supply. They need to know that twice a week they can get to their markets. And that's also where a challenge comes in, is trying to supply 3 times a week. It would be great if we could put everything on one aircraft once a week. Our negotiating power changes completely, but it doesn't suit the market. We need to get in 2-3 shipments a week into Europe. So it is a challenge. The Kenyans seem to dictate what prices, and our price is always whatever Kenya negotiates. As soon as those negotiations are finished, the airlines then turn. That's what Harare gets, is the balance of the equation. And it's because Kenya's got so much more volume than us at the moment. I mean, I'm optimistic that volumes are starting to grow, and hopefully we're going to start to see more and more volumes. Sea freight, I think, is going to be a dropping equation because we're going to be doing more and more sea freight, but air freight is going to be the difficult equation.
All right. And on the issue that John spoke about, the Rutenga issue, I don't know whether NHS, you can come in there, since you've been working on these dry ports and related infrastructure, whether it's something that is within your purview and...
Unfortunately, that is not under our mandate. Yeah, that will be national railways.
All right. So that one, maybe it will be left hanging in the air for now. But I hope the team is also taking notes in terms of the issues that needs to be pursued. Since our mandate and our mantra is action and action. So I don't know, Pete, whether you want to comment about this in terms of the prices or...
No, I think we'll leave it where it is. Just one issue, and that is road freight north of us. There are markets developing in Eastern Africa, and we currently, I believe, they're being shipped via Durban. Sounds crazy. So we're looking at potential options of road freighting in. Again, it's dependent on backloading to get the rates down, but it would fall into the COMESA ambit. But there would have to be some streamlining because you're going to be crossing 3 borders to get product to market, and that has tended to be a bit of a constraint when you're crossing borders in the region. Things tend to get snarled up, so that would be probably a bit of diplomacy required on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe to wrap up this session, the last 2 or 3 questions, and let's make them short and precise so that they can also respond in a similar manner. There's one there and there's another one there. Okay, so the third, sorry. All right. So yeah, Gordon, you can come through.
It's more of a statement. I think as farmers we choose strategic alliances and partners to get our job done, apart from the farming. So if freight has been one of those that we leave in the hands of the experts for obvious reasons. And we can only get better results with freight with volume. So we need volume. So the statement is, we've got a fantastic climate, we've got fantastic people, we just need fantastic policies. I'm not too sure about north of us, but they've got really good investment policies. Take Rwanda. So I ask for positive policy to get volume.
Thank you so much for that statement. Makoni, you can come through.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think I actually wanted to say what was said, because what had happened, I remember around 2018, I had a discussion with Peter Abers. He was then the CEO of KLM. And I was saying, look, we need a bit of more air freight into Zim. And then he was asking me that, I mean, what volumes are you shipping, right? So my point is exactly the reason why Kenya can negotiate is because they've got volumes. And then what we're actually doing as a country is, if you look at it, there's been so much funding that's actually going into command agriculture. You know, if you look at the grain, the sector, be it wheat or maize, there's a lot of money that's actually pouring into that sector. But I mean, if you look in the horticulture sector, we are struggling to get funding. I mean, this is what I can term a golden, opportunity that actually we have, because you can be assured of the returns, but we don't seem to be getting anywhere. When it comes to funding the horticulture sector, for starters. And then we also don't need to be getting anywhere in terms of, the land tenure, because those are the issues. Because, I mean, everyone look at that to say, okay, if I want to put money into the country, am I even going to be assured of getting what I've invested? Because the land policy is kind of like shifting. You don't know where you're going to be ending up tomorrow. But I believe those are actually issues that we need to start discussing open about, to say, okay, how best can you make sure that, the land can be used as collateral so that people can actually invest? Because I think those are the issues that we need to do. I mean, let's figure out how we can get funding into the sector and then deal with the land issue as well, because those are tied. Someone cannot just put money when they don't even know whether they're going to be getting even what they've invested back. So I think it's, I'm glad that General Chanagira is here. I think actually that's our core. Let's look at what has happened in terms of the agro-youth that CBZ is talking about, but nobody's putting money in the horticulture sector. So it's a little bit of a sad situation.
Thank you for that comment. Maybe the last comment, Mr. Harry.
Thank you. I would like to echo, in fact, Gordon's sentiments with regards to the critical mass. I think I've got the message loud and clear. But to achieve that critical mass, we need to go through a phase where the industry is, finessed carefully. And at this stage, I'm sorry I'm laboring the point.
Yeah.
The rates are undermining industry viability and compromising our competitiveness in a big way. Let me just give you a bit of history. And Phil will know this. In the mid-80s to the 90s, we had a tiered rate system in the industry, whereby the fresh produce industry was levied a lower rate than flowers. And let me explain. In that process, the airline was not compromised, because in determining the rates, we based it or looked at it on a yield per euro pallet. The dimensions of the pallet are the same, regardless of whether it's a flower pallet or a produce pallet. In other words, I'm looking at a space that will be occupied by that pallet once it's loaded on the main deck of the aircraft. That space, income to the airline, is the yield. At the time, we looked at the average weight of a fresh produce pallet. It was about 3 tons, if I remember well. And the For flowers, it was about 2.6. And if you multiply with the rates, the income or yield per pallet was the same. The point I'm making is, but at this point in time, the rates are the same regardless of a product you're putting on that pallet. So effectively, the fresh produce industry is subsidizing the higher value, low volume products. And I don't think it's fair. That's why the P guys are now shunning, airlines and preferring to send by sea. As a nation, we're being compromised. There's an excellent window during the months of May. If, in fact, anybody who is growing peas will make our money in May and June, those 2 months, because there's a shortage of the product in the market, and importers pay a premium price. All right. Now, by forcing us to go sea freight, we're missing that window now because of the transit time. So in the interest of the nation, I still want to hammer the point that we need to address the rate issue and encourage the fresh produce guys to fly the products into the market timelessly, and so that we can hit that window when the market is very strong.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harry. I think that's a profound contribution. But I think we have now come to the end of this section. But before we leave, I would like the panelists to just give a parting shot, what I would call a game changer statement. One statement saying something that you believe should be done for us to change the situation into a better one. I'll start from the furthest, Phil.
Because I've heard since I've been here today a number of discussions on freight rates. There's always higher benefits in the industry to air freight in April. There's higher benefits in the industry to pre-pack product, which results in lighter product. From an airline, we'd prefer to have you guys air freight all of your crop and loose pack it so that we get 3.3 tons on a pallet and we can start negotiating rates down. When we load a fresh produce pallet and it comes to 2.7 tons, the same as flowers, it's not attractive to the airline to carry it. And just to be clear, there is a difference between flower rates and fresh produce rates already because of the different load factors. But on blueberries, you can go 4.5 tons on a lower deck pallet, loose pack 3 kgs. And that's where the rate benefits come in, because the yield to the airline is good. Thanks very much.
Thank you. My last words to you, our dear colleagues, is your national airline is here for you with a listening ear. Let's come together. Let's discuss and find solutions for our challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. My last contribution is to you guys and the farmers. The Walvis Bay project is for you to use to export into Europe and other places. We need your support. Actually, we'll be coming to you so that you can actually tell us what we are supposed to be putting there that will suit your services. And we'll put it up for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Satenda. I think the core issue here, as it relates to citrus or heavy, bulky produce, is we need volumes. To achieve volumes, we need new plantings in Zim. And for new plantings to happen, the investment climate, and we're talking here land tenure, we're looking at 30-year tenure, needs to be ring-fenced, and you'll see a very rapid growth in this industry.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I think it was a worthwhile exercise that we did. A lot of action points that came in from your presentations and as well as from the floor. Let's clap hands for our panel as they take their seats. Thank you. So, Major General Chanakira, it seems like we have a burden here. The burden is we know. It seems like we know what needs to be done. We know the challenges that we have. And from the discussions, it looks like we have an idea in terms of how they can be solved. Maybe what needs to be established is when can we implement the things that we have discussed. And this is not only to government, but to everyone who is a stakeholder in this industry. I thank you.
Morning, everybody. Thanks, Tatenda, so much, and thanks to the panelists for giving us a lot of food for thought and, yeah, a lot more work. Major General Chanakira, welcome today, sir. It is my pleasure to be introducing the next speaker, but of course there's a story. Great. Anton, can you hear us? So it's a bit of a challenge because we've got dual presenters coming in. From Anton is in South Africa and Nelly from Belgium. So I'm just getting my cue from Dave on whether we're good to go. And he's successfully ignoring me. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, I'll introduce the next speaker is the Southern Hemisphere Association of Fresh Fruit Exporters, commonly known as SHAFE. SHAFE connecting the Southern Hemisphere fresh fruit industry through knowledge sharing, facilitating market access, and promoting global fruit trade. So with us today, we have the Fresh Fruit Produce Exporters Forum Chief Executive, Mr. Anton Kruger, who is there, and we also have Nelly Haju. Sincere apologies to both of you. We were supposed to have you with us yesterday, but we had major technical failure. I'm delighted that you could both join us today. Thank you so much for being here, and I will now hand over to you. Dave?
Can you hear as well? Because we have a bit of trouble to hear you, Linda.
Okay, I can hear you fine, and you don't need to hear me, so take it away. Okay.
Okay, perfect. I would be sharing the presentation, and I give the opening words to Anton.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to have the opportunity to talk to you. On behalf of SHAPE, the Southern Hemisphere Association of Fresh Fruit Exporters, of which I've been the president till recently. But today I'm also wearing the hat as the CEO of the Fresh Produce Exporters Forum of South Africa. So Zimbabwe, one of our neighbors, an important neighbor as well, with the trade relations between the two countries. So it is a privilege to share information with you today then about what SHAPE is, what the benefits of membership of SHAPE are, and also to give you some information on the South African fresh fruit export industry, especially as it relates to SHAPE and our membership of SHAPE. And I'll give you an example of two on exactly what we've experienced and what our experience still is, because we've been one of the founder members of SHAPE in the past. So I think without further ado, I'll hand over to the Secretary General of SHAPE, Ms. Nelly Haju.
Many thanks, Anton. Many thanks, Anton, for this introduction. Anton gave us already the roadmap, so I keep it short. My name is Nelly Haidu. I'm the Secretary General of SHAVE. And SHAVE is an organization which is already, as Anton hinted, 30 years old. People will be wondering where SHAVE is based. Funnily, we are based in Brussels, so in the Northern Hemisphere. That has the background that we thought it would be good to have the Secretariat on a neutral area and close to the key markets where we're operating in. So let me give you a few examples of what SHAVE is about. So SHAVE is the Southern Hemisphere Association for Fresh Fruit Exporters. So we are a trade entity composed of the leading trade association of 8 Southern Hemisphere countries, with no limitations to join for other countries from the Southern Hemisphere. Depending on the structure of each of the countries, we either have an umbrella association being represented in the organization or different commodity associations. The members of SHAVE represent round about 11 million tons of fresh fruit exports with a market value of $15.8 billion in 2022. So the 8 countries together represent already 25% of global total fresh fruit supply. The idea of SHAVE is that we are working for barrierless fresh fruit trade with benefits for the entire chain. So we're looking holistically on production, on the supply chain, as well as on the key markets. And the idea is really to look on connecting the different hemispheres in the fresh fruit industry through sharing, facilitating market access, and promoting global fruit trade. And as such, we are really working on several pillars. So we're looking on how can we strengthen the resource availability to make all our members stronger in the global market. We're trying to build new collaborations and partnerships. And of course, we're also looking on elements such as communication, training, and sustainability in particular, and I'm going to explain that in a second. A key element of our common work here is that we try also to build collaborations with organizations in the Northern Hemisphere, meaning that we have strong ties to formerly known as United Fresh and PMA. Now it's the International Fresh Produce Association. We are working very closely with Freshfel, the European Fruit and Vegetable Association, and we have signed a memorandum of understanding with the China Chamber of Commerce. So just to highlight what it is about, it is that we're really trying to strengthen our presence in the key markets and to understand what is happening in Europe, what is happening in the US, and what is happening in the Asian markets. Another pillar of what we're doing is that we really work closely with international organizations such as the World Bank, the IPPC, or the Food and Agriculture Organization. So in this, we are in particular trying, and I think COVID has been really accelerating this. We have been really trying to support our members with training, with webinars, with presence at trade shows during this very difficult trade period. So as you can see here on the picture, this is a picture of our common board meeting with our Chinese colleagues, the CFNA, where they would explain us the market access issues, customs topics, trade issues, and so on and so on. And the picture below shows our presence at Fruit Attraction in Madrid, which is one of the key trade shows in Europe, which is securing the Southern Hemisphere presence. So just to share with you a bit of data, because it's always good to see the different countries and their evolution. And I have been including Zimbabwe's market evolution, which is relatively similar to our smallest member, Uruguay, as you can see here. So first of all, volume in tons. You can see that South Africa and Chile are the leading exporters in terms of volumes, followed by New Zealand and Argentina. As I said, all in all, it's around about 11.5 million tons at the moment, and Zimbabwe is currently representing 60,000 tons in this environment. What I have to say is we're really looking on temperate fruit. So we're not covering banana, we're not covering pineapple, so we're really looking on those fruits which are counter-seasonal to the Northern Hemisphere. As such, we are very proud actually that in 2020 we had only a decline of 3% in terms of volumes, which has been in this environment very difficult to maintain. So that we only have a very few declines in exporting volumes to the key markets shows how hard we have been working together to ensure that the trade can continue to flow. In terms of value, you can really see that the fruit market is still growing, and so does the Southern Hemisphere markets. You see at the bottom as well Zimbabwe, maybe not very visible, but also with a growth curve. On average, including Zimbabwe, we see a 7% average annual growth in terms of volume, which shows the market value of fresh fruit in the world. And even during the COVID period, values continued to increase. Here we have a little switch. So there we have Chile as the leading entity in terms of value, followed by South Africa and Peru. If we look at the market trends, we see that in particular, like through all the commodity varieties, we can see a very positive growth. So we see citrus is still continuing to be a staple commodity with potential to be delivered to key markets. Grapes also is a category which is still continuing to evolve, as well as kiwi and berries. I'm handing over to you, Anton, because I think this was a good wrap-up of what we are doing and explaining the association's general ideas. But I would like you to talk more about collaboration and cooperation, how we're tackling common challenges and cooperation.
Thank you, Nelly. Yes, I think all the wonderful things that Nelly has mentioned now, the big question then really is that true? Is this really true that the collaboration does add value to the members of SHAPE? So I'll share a South African experience with you. Nelly can back that. To start off with that, we look at the model of SHAPE of cooperation and trust, and that's very important amongst the members. Without trust, then we cannot discuss matters and issues that are common to all the members, all the countries, freely and really openly to try and resolve some of those. So the first thing is that we have a collective voice when dealing with matters such as logistics or shipping lines or private standards, whatever in some countries. And secondly, sharing of information, the trends in every country with regards to production, with regards maybe to regulation in those countries, other things that can have an impact on production and exports. The climate, the volumes of export, Nelly showed you the graphs there, and the challenges that every country faces. And interestingly enough, when we discuss it, we discover that there are quite a number of challenges that are common to all 8 member countries. Just on the issue of volumes, just a comment on the slides that Nelly shared in terms of volume and value, where she indicated that South Africa is the #1 exporter in the Southern Hemisphere in terms of volume, but second in terms of value. And that is due to the fact that South Africa does not have trade agreements with the countries in the East, the 9 markets, our priority markets in the East. So that again, we discuss that, we get the information from the other members in a nice table format, and we share that with our government and show, look, our competitor countries all have green all over, they've got trade agreements. South Africa is red all over. We don't have anything. So that is one of the big values of SHAPE. You get quantified and reliable information that you can use in other instances, in negotiations, etc. Thirdly, the international reputation of the industry and of SHAPE, and that's important for the members as well, to know that if you're a member of SHAPE, you're part of this really reputable body. So when they engage, for instance, with the EU on behalf of the members, then the people in the European Commission would know that they're talking to SHAPE, so they're talking about a company or an association that's really credible. And then very important, the network and the contacts. We've seen a short slide on webinars, but also in the physical meetings. Most of them take place in the big international trade shows, such as Fruit Logistica in Berlin, or Asia Fruit Logistica in Hong Kong. So you are there as a SHAPE member, we have SHAPE meetings, but during that and after those meetings, you have a lot of network opportunities with your fellow exporters in the other countries and contacts being made with buyers and importers. And that very important point 5, it's action oriented, SHAPE. So it's not a talk shop. So the presidency, the executive would sit together, discuss the issues, and then develop solutions and drive that action. And Nelly is the big driving force behind all of that. So if you look at that, the question that we had, is it true that the collaboration and cooperation is there to tackle the common challenges? The answer is yes from our side. And to demonstrate that, I'll just share a small case study also with you. We look at the challenges that we are being faced with. So this is not only South Africa. In our meetings, we discuss those matters. We put it on the table from all the member countries. We say, okay, what are the primary challenges that we face? Phytosanitary, COVID-19, very important the past 2 years. Food safety issues, the maximum residue levels, logistical delays, very, very important still now. Domestic protectionism in some of the markets where we export to, a slowdown in demand, and that also then necessitates when all our members discover that, we say, okay, let's focus on new markets. And then we say, okay, others in their discussions, what are the other things? Specify what we do have. So as you see, the logistical delays perceived as a major market access challenge, 58%, and COVID-related issues, 47%. And also the domestic protectionism in the destination markets. So that forces then market access for new markets, but then the issues being faced there with concluding applications, etc. So those are the things we discuss, we identify that, and we develop solutions. And then also we share what are the major internal domestic challenges in each of our countries that we are facing with regards to the fruit industry. Again, we see the COVID, we see water shortages, labor, government policies, less domestic demand, rising costs. All of us see that now, the cost squeeze, product quality issues, and again, others that might be there. So what we've identified during the past 2 years as well in all our virtual meetings, the rising costs of the agricultural inputs, I think you'll be aware of that and sharing that. The most important domestic challenge, and then government policy related issues, regulatory environment. And then the COVID issues, obviously, and domestic demand is really not an issue of concern because we are the Southern Hemisphere Association of Fresh Fruit Exporters. So we're not that concerned about the domestic consumption in our own countries. And then the ad hoc crisis response to common challenges. In one of the previous slides with the 5 points you've seen, those are the, call it the permanent themes. But the COVID, when that arose, we had to monitor the markets, what's going on, what are the impacts that we could have quantified information, and also in our case, use that, go back to our government and say, here's quantified information, we need to act on this, this, and this. And then controls in some of the ports, Algeciras in Spain, an example. We all faced challenges in that port, so that's been addressed then collectively. And then ad hoc food safety and sanitary and phytosanitary issues in the countries. Again, when we discuss, we say, well, this is not only limited to South Africa, it's across the board, all the members, how do we address that with specific governments? and the logistics. So in South Africa, I think you're aware of our big concerns and challenges with our ports, but with COVID, we've seen internationally the port congestions, the container crisis, the shipping lines favoring the east-west trade instead of north-south. It's more profitable for them. So we see, when we discuss these logistic issues, how can we engage with the relevant authorities, the decision makers, can we collectively put the quantified information on the table? As Nelly said, 11 billion tons, so that's quite sizable. With a container use, how can we address that as a collective? Just another example impacting, if I come back to on Southern Africa, because our issues also are of concern to you in Zimbabwe with regards to fresh fruit exports. One example is South African legislation prohibiting vehicles exceeding 4.3 meters in height. That's got a real impact on the high cube containers being used the past 9-10 years on the trailer beds. Those containers are 30 centimeters higher than the old standard ones. So then we reach 4.6 meters. And the South African government issued a regulation about 9 years ago where it stated that vehicles exceeding 4.3 meters would not be allowed on South African roads. So we engaged with government a couple of times. We're trying to determine why. What is the reason? We've been unsuccessful for 8 or 9 years. So luckily we've been able to at least get a moratorium for a year every time that will still allow the vehicles for a certain period. But we're engaging constantly with government, and we say it's not only the fresh food exporters, so there's everything, every vehicle on the road. And then government said, okay, they will grant extension to the auto carriers and the double-decker buses. But trucks, anything that will be prohibited. So one of the implications would be trucks to and from Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe carrying goods into South Africa on vehicles, especially the high cubes for the fruit industry, strictly are not allowed on South African roads with a 4.6 meter in height. So we told our government, we put a lot of emphasis on intra-Africa trade, but if this is the case, that is put it a self-imposed constraint on developing, again, the trade. And so we've been involved in doing a lot of research to see and try to determine what the reason is. We still couldn't get to that. So the solutions that we've said, okay, one of them would be to move more freight back to rail. But the situation with our rail system in the country, it's really not functional, very functional at the moment. So at this stage, that is another project from our side. We've started with that 10 years ago to get more fruit back onto rail. So currently we do run 2 trains a week from up north to Durban when it's citrus season. We have some trains running from the Western Cape to the Port of Cape Town. And we've tried from the Orange River side with grapes, but beginning of the season this year, when we wanted to start with the project, we realized some of the railway tracks being stolen, so the railway track was not there. And then the ports, I've alluded to that, because that's also got a big impact on you as well. I think specific the Port of Durban, because you're also part of the Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa. Delays in the ports, the congestion, equipment's not been maintained for 10 years, not been replaced. You said breakdowns all the time. And then COVID had an impact on the staff, also contributed to the delays, equipment, and then shipping lines avoiding South African ports, omitting the ports. That's the impact that we can't service some of the markets. Again, the solution, we say we're solution-driven industry, so we've managed to get weekly meetings with the top management of Transnet who operate the ports. One of the things that we've escalated to the office of the president of the country was to say, but split the owner of the land, being the Transnet Ports Authority, and that's the responsibility of the operator, Transnet Port Terminals. So that was for a couple of years. The president this year said, yes, we'll do that, and that was done. 2 separate boards. So I think that is the first step that we can do, a closer private-public partnership, that the private industry, the private companies, the private fruit exporters can really come together and say, well, how can we maybe operate the part of the port in conjunction then with Transnet to ensure that we have more efficiency in the ports. And also, when we need to increase capacity, how can we do that? What is allowed, what not? How can we take that forward? Yeah, thanks. And then I hand back to Nelly. When Nelly opens her mic, then she can continue with the sustainability issues. Thank you, Nelly. Nelly, you're muted.
Okay. Sorry. Many thanks, Anton. For us, it was really important not just to present a bit the organization, but also the members' view. And we thought that especially as South Africa is the neighbor of Zimbabwe, that could be quite interesting as well to hear the perspective, how they are using the organization and what kind of benefits we are creating from that. And I think to make this a bit more vivid, I would like to give you 2 examples where we are very engaged and how we're trying to overcome elements which may be competitive or which may be difficult, just to highlight that it's not always easy to find compromise, but it is possible. So one of the big projects we have been engaging this year is our sustainability task force. Why is that? For years and years, we have been having the discussion that Northern Hemisphere markets, Europe, is creating a lot of pressure by reducing MRLs, by going the Green Deal road, and so on and so on. And we were always clear that we need to react and that we need to respond, but we never knew how. And this year we said, okay, we need to tackle it. We form a task force, and you can see it's a very diverse task force. So we have Latin American members, we have members from New Zealand, we have South Africa present, we have Brazil. And throughout our process, we have been really working on our common view, on our common definition of what sustainability means for fresh fruit production in the Southern Hemisphere. And going from there, we are now creating a roadmap with action points, which soon will be published. Having said this, we have identified 10 points which are of common concerns, among them preserving biodiversity, protecting the environment, but also more practical operational elements such as capacity building, ensuring the funding and finance, communicating what we're already doing. So we are on a road now to develop this kind of roadmap, and coming from there also working towards action points. Another very practical example in what we're doing currently is that SHAFE is an active member of the IPPC, the International Plant Protection Convention's ePhyto Project Industry Advisory Group. And as such, we have been supporting the development of electronic phytosanitary certification globally throughout the last 5 years, be it with outreach, be it with webinars dedicated for the fruit sector, but also with very concrete advocacy to the European Union, saying we need one system and not bilateral system for the transmission of phytosanitary certificates. And we recently have been urging as well the Chinese government to really speed up their onboarding to the system. So this is something where we see the common denominator, where we see that all Southern Hemisphere countries are connected to the system, and where we really can support trade facilitation. And last but not least, we are currently, it's just a snippet of what we're doing, obviously. So there's much more, and we're happy to talk about this with you in future. But one of the major things we believe is that for the fruit sector, it's essential to create more opportunities for education, meaning that in particular, middle management and fruit trade professionals are often lacking possibilities of continuing their educational journey and to be more professional. So we are currently developing a fruit trade master program together with the Complutense University in Madrid and the FAO e-learning academy, which hopefully will be launched in 2022. With that, we're coming to an end. I leave the last word to Anton. Anton, last word to you.
Thank you, Nelly. Yes, I hope that our guests have now a clear and good idea of what SHAPE is, the value of SHAPE, and how exciting it is to be part of that. And I think just one take-home message from this is the importance of collaboration. And I think COVID-19 has really, again, confirmed why we need to collaborate to find joint answers to our challenges. Thank you very much. With that, back to the program director.
Thanks, Anton and Nelly. Thank you both very much for that. And definitely, we agree with you there that a problem shared is a problem halved. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. And also just to ensure Zimbabwe's commitment to strengthen cooperation in those areas. If you can hear us okay, I think we'd allow one or two questions. How are we sounding on your side, Anton? And Nelly?
We really have problems to hear you well.
Okay. I think we'll leave it there then. I don't want to push my luck too much with the technical side. So just to thank you both very much and thank you for your patience with our technical issues yesterday. We'll definitely be in touch. Thank you so much. I will hand back over to Chiedza, who's going to give you the roundup for the next session.
Thank you very much. And before we go into the next session, I would just like to give a vote of thanks to our sponsors. CBZ Agro Yield as a platinum sponsor, Stanbic, EcoBank, FBC have all been very supportive as gold sponsors, and Cassava Agritech. The next session that we are going into is one focused on investment and money. So I would love to invite Wellington Mutizwa of CBZ. He'll be moderating. Forward Takaindisa, Simbarashe Mungu of CBZ again, Godfrey Chnoera, ZADT, Professor Maxwell Mutema. So I would like to apologize because from the very confused looks, we did have to amend the program a little bit. Shafe was not able to join us yesterday, so we had to squeeze them in. And for our sustainable production panel discussion, we have one speaker who regrettably fell ill this morning and we had to find a last-minute replacement. But I'm very happy that Wellington Mutizwa, I would like to call you up to manage the discussion. And I think this will be a great opportunity for our financial institutions to answer some of the questions that farmers raised yesterday around patient capital, working capital, interest rates. So I do not envy bankers today, as I think it may possibly get very heated. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you. We do have one of our panelists who is literally on their way and is arriving on the 11th hour. Mr. Takaindisa will be joining us, and so you will see someone walking up to the stage mid-panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiedza, for that. Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to our session on investment and money. Just a bit of recap. Yesterday, we highlighted key issues with regards to the growth of the horticultural sector. We also spoke about the need for funding. We spoke about access to capital, both working capital and long-term, and also fixed capital for investments. We also spoke about security, the security requirements in the financial services sector. We also spoke about integrating the spokes of the hub and spoke model. So today we are here as the commercial sector, growers and government, not to focus on the challenges, but come up with intervention to help the sector grow. And however, within that growth, we do, however, need to ensure that in line with Vision 2030, no man is left behind. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session. To kick off our session, I would just like to talk a little bit about the main points that we want to discuss today in the financial services sector. We're mainly going to focus on financial innovation. We are going to speak about risk sharing. We are also going to speak about barriers of entries that comes with the hub and spoke model, which probably helps, actually, the hub and spoke model helps to lower barriers of entry. So to help me kick off these discussions, I've got three distinct gentlemen here who have got extensive experience in the financial services sector to help me tackle this topic. And just to kick off our discussion, I would ask our distinguished panelists to just do a 5-minute discussion on what they see in terms of investment money issues in the financial services sector regarding funding of the horticulture sector.
Thank you so much. My name is Godfrey Chinoera. I was hoping that some of my colleagues still in the mainstream banking would start. But I want to say that from my experience, I have experienced a time, like the chair was saying, when we used to have quite innovative financing structures, some of which I believe would help the industry grow. Or one of the challenges that was mentioned is the issue of volume. And for me, the issue of volume, for us to deal with that, is that there is need for investment in new activities and to grow the activities. So the issue of patient capital, the issue of development funding, the issue of long-term funding becomes a critical issue for me. For some of you who may not know me, I had my banking experience working for Zimbabwe Development Bank, where I worked 10 years there in the early 90s. And I see a number of farmers, some of whom are old now, whom we actually financed with project financing, which was obviously, I know we don't have that in the country at the moment. But project financing, which is basically, it was long-term, medium to long-term. I know we used to fund up to 9, 12 years. Other than that, it really focused, when you talk of risk mitigation, it really focused on the project, and there was less emphasis on the collateral side. So thinking back, and when I attend workshops, which I do in the region, and when obviously, you know, in a lot of those workshops, we are not given much prominence. But I feel sad because some of the things that are happening there are things that we have done before. So I think there are options. So for me, when I look at the horticulture space, maybe the 5-minute just before, to summarize the 5-minute, when I look at the horticultural space, I see 3 important areas. The first one is that we need funding designed for long-term investments, including into new activities or initiatives.
Secondly, I see that we need a lot of innovation around risk mitigation. And that brings to me the idea of blended financing in the horticultural sector. Because as Zimbabwe, if we have to look at inclusive development, that will look at our youth, that will look at our women, that will look at our rural communities being integrated in development, we need blended financing options that provide for that long term, that may provide for some grant funding, that might also provide for some equity funding, because one of the challenges to scale up is that, and the bankers who are sitting here will tell you, that one of the challenges to scale up is that most do not have adequate capital or strong balance sheets to scale up. And irregardless of what you do, that balance sheet is limited to a certain amount of money. So unless you complement it by maybe equity or other investors, you always remain in that, so you cannot scale up. But again, it's sort of designed a pension fund, equity funding. Then thirdly, one of the key aspects, which may not be taken as actual direct funding into operations, but I think the funding of skills development in horticulture is very critical for me. So if we have funding to ensure that we have infrastructural development, long-term funding, if we have properly structured blended funding which is inclusive to ensure, and I'm not talking about the specific products for now, but there are a number of products we can talk about in blended financing. Then thirdly, if we ensure that we properly develop skills and are able to ensure that there is capacity development, for me those are the three critical issues I see for the sector. And perhaps as I will have more opportunity, I can add more things. But let me leave this for my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So you're already touching on some of the issues that we need to deal with in terms of the questions that will come regarding sort of what sort of financing structures can be put in place in the financial institutions. So we'll come to that in detail a little bit later on. So if we can just speak to your experience, what you've gone through, what you see, so that when we then unpack everything else, we can discuss about possible solutions that we can offer to the horticultural industry. Dr. Mtem.
Can you hear me?
A little.
Oh, okay. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Mutema. I have a very strong background in commercial farming. Worked for Anglo America before at Mazoe Citrus Estates, and then did a whole lot of other things. I am going to be talking a little bit about the opportunities for horticultural financing from one of my heads as the financial advisor or agribusiness finance advisor for the Trade and the Development Bank of Eastern and Southern Africa, formerly called the PTA Bank, is now called the TDB Bank. So in terms of horticulture financing, I would say Zimbabwe is very fortunate that if you look to every serious financier, whether it's TDB that I'm involved doing, or the IFC, or even the Africa Development Bank, we have a very good legacy of, I think, during the hate days or the good days of farming in this country, the farmers in this country had made a very good impression and name, not just in Africa but internationally. We used to have a group of farmers in terms of servicing loans who were known globally to honor their debts and to pay their debts. And that goodwill is still there. If you talk to everyone, they will tell you that we have Zimbabwe on the radar. We are just waiting to see what's going to happen on the policy front. but there is a very good will for this country to finance agriculture and horticulture in particular. In the case of TDB, our minimum loan size is 10 million, and we do that because it's easier to manage bigger loans than smaller loans. So we have often found that farmers require maybe much less than that, and our funding is in foreign currency as well. So what we wanted to share with you as a direct opportunity and as a way of mitigating risk on our side is we would prefer an organization like HDC as an intermediary to maybe borrow that loan through a financial institution and then see how that can be managed. You find on average, you hardly find a person who wants to borrow $1 million in Zimbabwe if it is to be paid in foreign currency. So one of our ways of mitigating risk, which is associated with Zimbabwe, by the way, General Chanagira, I have to say to you, this country, by financial institutions, is perceived to be a very risky country. When you are looking at any investor or any banker, you always see a section called risk assessment. And if it's Zimbabwe, on every risk assessment report, there would be some points on property rights, security of tenure. You can never go without that, especially if it's agriculture specifically. So I know that this is a big take for you, General Chanakira, as a person. It requires the whole government machinery. But global and international, we are perceived as a very risky country. And let me tell you, others have been saying capital is timid. People with money are there to look for more money. And they don't give a damn when they see that, there's a risk that will make them lose their money. So I think it is on the policy front that we have a big elephant in the room. Otherwise, there's lots of man out there which is willing to come into this country, especially to support export horticulture, high-value horticulture, and the value addition to horticulture. All we need to fix our policies to make them attractive. And I think HDC, through the chairman or the CEO, we would be very glad as TDB to. We have money and we are being pushed that we must be seen to be doing something in Zimbabwe, but there is nothing bankable or nothing that brings us comfort of mind that we can give out $10 million and give it and have it back in the same currency that we would have given it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mtema. So the money is there. We want to see how the money can go to the farmers, to the growers, and in what form, in what structuring can be done so that that money becomes available, given the cocktail of issues that we have regarding conditions of lending. Thank you for that, Mr. Mungu.
Thank you, Wellington. We appreciate that. My name is Simbarashe Mungu, and I work for AgroYield, which I'm sure everyone knows. It's the conduit for the Command program, which supports farming, particularly in row cropping, your maize, wheat, and soya. And so it's, and we're also one of the primary sponsors for this conference. And there's a good reason for that. We are all aware of what Command has done for this nation. People have perceptions about Command, good and bad, but I think without a doubt, we all know that if there is any program that has de-risked agriculture in this country, or de-risked funding of agriculture in this country, it's Command. We talk of concessionary financing. We talk of exploratory capital. This can be seen through what has happened. It's exploratory because it has extended funds to farmers who otherwise didn't have, one, the skill set, and most, if not all, who didn't have the collateral. They might have had the collateral, but they didn't pledge it. It's concessionary because it came at a cost of capital that is below market rates. Right? And each and every one of us here, in one way or another, up and down the value chain, has been a beneficiary of this. You just have to look at the yields this particular year in terms of what we've done with maize, and soy and wheat. We've got a record wheat crop this year. Now, why has this program succeeded in the quantums or in the verticals that I've mentioned? Okay. It's done that by one, being able to extend capital to farmers across the board. So by nature, it's been inclusive, right? It's been inclusive, and we've had a scalable product that has come out. So if you look at the maize yields, the soy yields, and the wheat yields. Okay. Now, Zimbabwe, as he was mentioning, has got risk factors that probably no other country on planet Earth has to deal with. So when you look at a financial model in your global bank and you see Zimbabwe, the first thing you will think is zero property rights. Okay? So the cost of capital that you're going to extend to this country to make up for the potential loss is extreme. And how global bankers model this, they say the sovereign risk that I'm taking, so the risk that I'm taking on Zimbabwe as a country is X, and it's very high because of this property rights issue. Any loan that I extend to the country has to be above sovereign risk, which means any company in Zimbabwe is going to have a cost of capital that's higher, most likely higher than at any other company anywhere in the world. So by virtue of that, we can't compete. And then you talk about the tenure of the capital. So the duration of that loan is likely to be lower because that individual needs to recover their money very quickly, which increases our cost of capital. Right. So by nature, we are at a huge disadvantage as Zimbabweans. So then what is the option? Okay. The option are similar programs such as what has happened with agro-yield, which give a local exploratory capital and concessionary financing to local entities to do exactly what we have come to do here. Okay. So that is the spirit in which agro-yield is coming here, to see how it can assist you as a farmer scale up your operations. It has been told yesterday and today that the secret is in new projects. Not pre-existing, but new projects. And we have a legacy, the benefit of a good legacy. So we have to leverage legacy. If you go around this country, we have more old pack houses, farms, infrastructure than any other country on this continent. And yet we have not leveraged the legacy that we have. I can tell you that the farm workers at each and every one of these farms will wake up today and they know how to operate a retort. They know how to operate a boiler. If you don't think that's valuable, go to Tanzania or to Nyanyuki or to South Sudan and go and try and teach someone how to operate a boiler or a retort or to operate a seam. It's extremely difficult. It'll take you 5-6 years to get the level of skill set that we have pre-existing in this country. So the raw ingredients are there, except two items: security of tenure and financing. And that is where agro-yield and some of the programs we're looking to launch can come in to come and help you, just as we've done with maize, wheat, and soya. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mungu, for those insightful insights. I'm sure we'll talk more about it in our discussion. Thank you. Mr. Takaende, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Forward Takaindi, sir. I've worked in a number of horticultural projects that involved smallholder farmers. And it was more of implementation of the hub and spoke models within Zimbabwe. And the reason why smallholder farmers have to be involved
the hub-and-spoke model and also in horticulture production. There's a lot of potential around the smallholder farmers, especially in irrigation schemes and dumbbells. And we have seen that there's a lot of sunk costs in terms of investment that might need to be resuscitated across the country. I know places like Mrewa, there are some storage facilities that can be used there, you know, and a number of facilities that are across the country, including our own central facilities at Harare International Airport. So how the hub-and-spoke model worked is we selected smallholder farmers or using a certain selection criteria where we looked at their experience, you know, in production of horticultural crops, especially for export. And then number two, we're looking at the availability of water and also availability of land. And what we then did were to integrate these smallholder farmers into bigger farmers that we could call lead farms. For example, you've got a successful farm, say in Mrewa, and you've got farmers in irrigation schemes around Mrewa. Those farmers would then need funding and a bit of technical assistance so that they would feed into the bigger lead farm, and the bigger lead farm would then export on behalf of the smallholder farmers. This project was targeting the low-hanging fruits and crops that are not very difficult to grow. I'm talking of peas, I'm talking of fresh chilies, and other horticultural crops that are not, in terms of technical expertise, the demand is not as huge as other complex crops. And also in terms of investment that is required to start those projects. The capital outlay in terms of working capital is not as big as compared to other horticultural crops. The success of that was premised on the technical expertise around the lead farms or around the big farms where the smallholder farmers would feed into. So in terms of the funding, the lead farm was responsible for making sure that the crop is at the right quality, right specs, and then exportable. And then that crop will then be exported on behalf of the farmer, leveraging on the certification of the lead farm. However, in terms of funding for the smallholder farmers, the major target for funders for smallholder farmers are the microfinance institutions, where they can outlay loans between 100 and 250 US dollars, and this will be sufficient for a group of smallholder farmers that will then fund at least 0.25 hectares to 1 hectare. This was done to spread the risk, number one. Number two, in terms of financial risk and the risk of failure in terms of production for the farmers. And in terms of transport was a bit of a challenge, but in terms of transport, you know, we contracted third-party transporters, and to some extent, transport was provided by the lead farms to pick the product from the farms at the right exportable yield within the shortest possible time, taken to the pack house, graded, exported. Once the crop is exported, then the farmers will be paid. Once the exporter has been paid, or the lead farm then goes back and pays the smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Takayendesa, for those insightful comments. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you all for your brief comments and brief points. We're now going into the discussion session. We now need to unpack and tackle a little bit and go into detail in terms of some of the profile solutions that the financial sector is talking about. So my first question is try to understand, you are talking about policy interventions from the policy side. What sort of policy interventions do financial institutions require for them to extend more of this capital to the horticultural industry? When I listen to you, everyone is saying we've got the skills, we've got the farmers, somehow we've got the capital locked somewhere, but it's not getting to the farmers. So what sort of policy interventions can incite you or incentivize the financial institutions to try and unlock this funding to the farmers and the growers?
So in terms of policy interventions, I think I would summarize by saying we do not, banks do not want cosmetic or window dressing policy changes. They really want the radical policy changes which show that we have changed our course of action in terms of what is preventing the bankers from participating. I think I will leave it there, but it's a loaded statement. So it's like if you have had or you have had a difference with somebody, the real way to show that we can now work together well is that if you don't show a sea change of behavior on anything that we have differed, then it's very difficult for me to be convinced that. So I think in terms of policies, especially around the issues to do with the security of tenure, there has to be some really bold decisions to be taken and to be made. The other thing maybe that I can say we should do is consultation. You know, at one point I was talking to the bankers, one of the bankers association presidents, and I was saying, you guys, I always hear the government saying they have engaged for your input into the 99-year list. But when I ask any banker, he says, if anyone has got money on a 99-year list, bring that person to me. I want to see them. So the point that I'm saying here is that even in this policy dialogue, we need open and frank consultations and dialogue between the stakeholders and the policymakers. Because there has been a situation where bankers say we can't really have an honest dialogue with the government on what we want on the 99-year list for it to be bankable. And because of that, we always tell them that is fine, but we will meet you in the bank when you want when you want the money. So the issues, there must be a consultation and open. I heard one guy was saying they want to put up a cold room in Vic Falls and in Bulo, and someone immediately said, but it's a bit of a distance. So already I can see that if there was a talk between Hdc, who may want the cold room wherever it is, it may not have to be put up in Victoria Falls, but somewhere where the growers are. So the point is there's always need for open, frank, and objective dialogue on policy engagements. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mtema, for that. I will take maybe two more views. We're respecting time. I think Mr. Mungu would like to contradict you on the fact of the 99-year list. So let me just give him the floor.
Yes. You know, and I don't like to work with semantics. In Zimbabwe, I've learned that let's look at what has actually worked and let's build on it. Because we've got skeptical policymakers, right, who might not be acquiescing to, who might not understand some of the interests that are coming in. So let's work with what has worked. And I'll go back to agro-yield or /command with all the different perceptions of it. In the benefit of hindsight, we've got a lot of data that we've been able to glean about the success of the program. Okay? So out of the successes, we've realized that you can actually build upon the success of individuals, of entities that have leveraged the program well. Okay? So think of it as exploratory capital, and then someone catches or someone then takes advantage of it and grows because of it. So those same individuals and farmers are the same ones that can be financed to grow without collateral because they've showed a propensity to be able to pay back the loans without the need of someone coming to say, listen, I'm going to take an asset from you. But I'm going to move on to say that COVID-19 has poked some holes into the model that we have with the 99, with the offer letters. We have had a lot of deaths on farms. And the people supposedly who are supposed to take over, which is usually the children or the spouses, tend not to have the same capacity as the individual who was on the farm. So there's a lack of continuity from one generation to the next. Right? And so the JVs that are out there have become extremely helpful in being able to unlock values from the same piece of land, which means transferability of the right of use of the same land is actually extremely effective, and you can collateralize transfer of use of an asset. Right? If you're an accountant, you can actually understand this, that transfer of use of an asset is an asset, right? And you can fund that. So we can look at those models where the underlying ownership of the land can remain in my name, for example, but right of use can transfer between one person to the next. Now, this happens in the Middle East. And it still works because governments are able to respect that tenet of the law. So it's one way of looking at it. So I believe that that would be a good first step if we're able to implement that. And I know for a fact, from an agri-yield perspective, that is a model that we can definitely finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mungu, for that. You want to give it a go? Okay, everyone will have a chance.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You know, I'm listening and thinking aloud here that you see my colleagues, some of my colleagues in the banking, you see I've sat in the banking, mainstream banking. I've worked in the banking sector for 20 years. I told you the 10 years with Zimbabwe Development Bank. I had another 10 years with the Trust Bank, during which also we financed some of the guys sitting here. And through the Hub and Spoke, you know, we were big in Kondozi, you know, Michelle and Michelle. Similar, you know, these are models that we have done. And during that time, we were financing 70% of exporters in Zimbabwe. But from 2013, I've also been sitting in financing, but from a development. This is why I'm with Zimbabwe Development Bank, Zimbabwe Agricultural Development Trust. But what I noticed, and which I think I would like to share and contribute, is that I can see that there are stakeholders here in the horticultural sector. And I think it is very important that whatever we do, the solutions, the facilities, they also have the heartbeat of these stakeholders. And I would be looking, and I'm putting on my development hat. And I heard when I was following the workshop yesterday online, I heard from the Deputy Minister about the 20 million. I heard from the Deputy Minister of Finance about, I think it was 169 something. I heard about the funding, and I'm hearing my colleague from CB said agro-yield. So it appears to me that there is finance. But what I would look at is how involved are the stakeholders. My view is that there needs to be collaboration, like you said, between the stakeholders here and the funding that is available in terms of structuring it. Because also, I think we have to admit, this is why I gave this background, sitting from the banking side, these guys, my colleagues, are profit-centered. And whilst we may talk about this, at the end of it, it's a profit-oriented. These are businesses that are in money. And you stakeholders are businesses that are in making money also. And I think for these special facilities that are availed, to say that there is a funding that is going to target horticulture, I would expect that the council and the providers of funding set up some structure, I don't want to give it a name, which allows for that engagement and collaboration to say, how is this funding going to support the sector? Other than just saying that we have put this funding with AFC Limited, we have put this funding with agro-yield, then farmers go there. How involved are the stakeholders? And really, I'm saying this sitting from the development perspective. And I used to sit also like a banker speaking, like many bankers do. But at the end of the day, the stakeholders go and say, but how do I accept? Yes, risk we do have. And I understand, General Chanagira, these are real issues on risk and so on. But we do not stop producing. Stakeholders here are producing. So within the risks that we have and based on the funding that we have, how can we benefit these stakeholders? This is my take. So I don't know whether this speaks to policy, but for me, I think that engagement, that collaboration, that goes beyond just allocating funding, but that goes to the extent of involving stakeholders in the actual structuring and saying, how is this going to be? Why am I saying that? Because it's about value chain development. It's about value chain. This industry, this sector, would know that it's a value chain. So for it to operate properly, there is different funding, different partners, we call them nodes on value chain, that need to be supported with different structures, not one size fits all. And usually we get a one size fits all when we talk about funding a sector. I'm not sure whether I'm being relevant, but thank you.
You well within your rights. You are definitely on point in terms of the points of discussion. I appreciated that you got a lot of questions, more to put to the policymakers and to also the stakeholders here to try and encourage lobbying. So I would say, yeah, lobbying and policy, they go hand in hand. One has to set the tone, the other has to follow through trying to get a favorable result for their own, own activities as we go on. But thank you for that, Mr. Tagandes.
Thank you very much. CBZ Agro Youth, you have highlighted some very, very important issues to do with funding. And I understand this is funding that comes out without serious collateral to talk about. In terms of your involvement, I know smallholder farmers, they play a very, very big role in the whole supply, in the whole horticulture value chain. They play their own roles, and we have seen their roles in Barem, Sika, we have seen some horticultural crops all over. I mean, probably all of us, when we left home, we have taken some produce that could have been produced by a smallholder farmer, landed in some supermarket and so forth. In terms of your financing, how have you modeled your financing in such to support the smallholder farmers that are also quite key in the horticulture sector? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Tagandesa. Almost thought you were a banger there. So I was asking, is the banger asking himself the same question that he should answer? But thank you for that insightful question. I think, Mr. Mongo, you want to give a shot at that?
Thank you for that. I think we are aware that from a banking perspective, from a money perspective, a smallholder farmer as an individual has more inherent risk factors as an individual than as a group. Okay. So the group lending model tends to de-risk that model, tends to de-risk the ability for me to finance. And I think we need to relook at group lending models that allow funding to flow in that method. But you usually want to tie it up to a hub in order to de-risk. So it's highly unlikely that a financial institution will even lend to a group without a dedicated off-taker. But that off-taker is likely to have conditions, agronomic conditions, maximum or minimum residue levels, and all sorts of different aspects of that tied to that particular product. Okay. So when we talk about funding a value chain and an ecosystem, we have to relook at funding an entire chain as opposed to an individual or a specific group. So you're looking at the hub and the spoke. So if you go to Kenya, to Mount Kenya, around the mountains of Nyanyuki, you see that a lot with KHE, Kenya Horticulture Exporters. So all those smallholder farmers that you see who are doing fine beans, right, are all tied to a KHE pack house, okay? And they're a critical part of that supply chain. And we all know the problems that have happened in Kenya because of chemicals that have come from China and other places that have led to minimum residue levels being flouted, those laws, and which has actually helped us because people are looking at product from Zimbabwe other than Kenya because of those issues. So I think we have to relook at how we look at the smallholder farmer, because as an individual, it's extremely difficult, and the cost of capital will just be too high because the default rate will be high. So I don't think we've cracked it as a nation, because as banks, we don't have access to long-term capital to be able to take the peaks and troughs of the defaults, which do happen when you have to go up the experience curve with smallholder farmers. So we have not cracked it yet.
Thank you for that. You know what, guys, we can continue on the policy, but in the interest of time, we just have to move on. I've got a few more questions that I want you guys to discuss, and probably in the interest of time, let's move on. So, from a policy point of view, there are those issues that you have highlighted, but however, we are also, as growers and farmers here, we would want to know what incentives are available to stimulate this sector so that it grow. I want to do, geez, do I know horticulture? I want to do tomatoes. I want to do tomatoes. What can you incentivize to me as a financial institution so that I come? We're all talking about cost of capital. We're saying it's too high. We're talking about security. All those kind of stuff does not bode well with someone who is trying to grow his business, who is trying to grow his small little business. So what incentives can you guys talk about or discuss that we can offer and stimulate the sector so that there is growth and investment in that sector? Thank you, Dr. Mtema.
Okay, so one of the incentives is just to show that you are organized, like you have done, Mr. Harry and the company. I think financial institutions, in the absence of maybe at the moment some of the challenges of collateral, if a commodity association is organized, it really helps to approach a financial institution, showing how well organized you are. And like I said, in the case of TDB, they would prefer maybe if there was an intermediate like HDC. So just being organized as a commodity association is an incentive. And I think those who know the success and heydays of commercial agriculture in this country, it succeeded behind a very organized machinery, and it was farmers who were just self-organized. And I kind of want to congratulate you guys, because I think you are trying to kind of bring back that a little bit, because as long as you are not organized, even in terms of lobbying the policy we are talking about, you have to talk with a coherent, very organized mind, and I think that's the semblance of what you are trying to. So just being organized as farmers or horticulture producers is an incentive when you approach banks. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Mtema. You want to go for it?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to respond to that question. For me, when you ask incentives, I'm taking it that because from the banking sector, I think it is what mitigates risk. It's a risk, it's in another way a risk-related question to say what is it that mitigates risks. You know, this is what the banks will be looking at. So if the clients or the potential borrowers are placed in a position where much of the risks are mitigated, but I know we will talk about risk. But I would just like to emphasize to add on to what he has said. I am with Zimbabwe Agricultural Development Trust. We have, in the recent years, we're primarily providing funding to smallholder farmers and to value chain actors that work with smallholder farmers, and that we're doing through commercial banks and microfinance institutions. One of the things that we have started to do in recent years, from 2 years ago, is to be involved in capacity development, in entrepreneurship development. And this was in realization that most of the opportunities that we look at in development, and obviously when you talk to to the farmers here, to the stakeholders, with some in-depth understanding, you will see that there's a lot of potential and that needs support. But the gap is we've seen that when they go to the banks, their proposals do not progress much because in a lot of ways they don't make banking sense. I wanted to just say sense. I know that's not correct. It doesn't make banking sense. So we've started entrepreneur development to sort of train, capacitate, help them to develop their plans, help them to put what the banks, when they ask, they will respond. And so for me, the question incentive is, I don't know whether the banks can actually do directly, but institutions like us have come in to sort of provide that impetus so that when they go, the banks will be less likely to just turn away and say, go away.
Thank you very much. So my producer just said when she wants to say time up, she lifts an orange. But this time she said, I didn't see the orange. She had to come and say, you know what, we're running out of time. Okay, so we also need to open the discussion to the floor. So before I continue being the only one who is the smartest in this room, can I just give you some minutes, Mr. Mungu, to comment so that we open the discussion to the floor?
Absolutely. If I were in a farmer's shoes at the moment, I'd be looking for local capital at a cost of capital that is sub-commercial, with terms that are sub-commercial. If you look at regular financing, it's got stringent collateral requirements at a cost of capital that is commensurate to the overnight rate at a minimum, right, which is 60% in RTGS at the moment, which is likely going to be landing to you at about 80% in RTGS terms. That will constrain any business. So at Agro Yield, we are able to provide financing at sub-commercial rates without a stringent or a bank-level KYC in terms of collateral. That is actually what a business needs in order to grow. We give breathing room and space for a business. That's what we can do at Agro Yield for someone right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mungu, for that comment. So if I can open the floor for questions. Yes, at the back, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mine may be a question per se, but probably a contribution, maybe in supporting probably something that is already happening. The issues around funding, I think when we go back to basics, particularly the small holder farmers, obviously because of the risks that the uncertainty, and some of them obviously it may be issues to do with organization, to say they may not be organized enough to kind of approach a bank for funding. But obviously when I look at Horticultural Development Council, I think there's a lot of scope and probably looking at deliberate strategies around the capacity building and in trying to assist those smallholder farmers to be organized and to trying to be bankable, because I think that's the main disease, sorry for it, lack of better word, bankability. I think for these farmers, for a bank to say, okay, I can give my money, I think it's important. So through capacity building, obviously HDC can also come up with a way of affiliation where they do capacity building, educate them how to actually account for money that they will get. And probably as HDC, maybe they can come up with some kind of package where there can be a guarantee, maybe doing an intermediary role between the banks and the farmers. Make sure that at least these farmers now, when they register through the council will obviously do homework, background, work, try and make sure that wherever they are registering, they actually, educated and also kind of keep the information which make them bankable, so that at least even if they are to get funding through a particular group, they will know that they will pay back. And obviously when they pay back, is that kind of, trust that must be then, be built. When those obviously bank, when they actually lending, they don't want NPLs. So I think that's issues that I thought I would highlight. Besides the command agriculture, obviously there are other.
Sorry, sir. In the interest of time, I got to ask you to round up.
Sure.
Or ask your questions so that we give others a chance to.
Yeah. My last one is deliberate strategy on the partners. Try and make sure that at least we get partners for affordable inputs for those that are not benefiting through command. To try and make sure that maybe through HDC they come up with partners where those farmers can actually also get maybe discounts or so in return for support within the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. At the back. Oh, he's got a mic up here.
Thank you.
So probably to make sure that we get quickly to the questions, can I ask that we got 3 questions asked, then we give to the panel so that we quicken the pace. So over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think mine will be more or less a comment, and I think it's important that we demystify this risk in agriculture financing. And unfortunately, I think I want to put the bankers on the spot here, is that in a big way, you might actually have confirmed one of the challenges that we have from a perception point, from the bankers' point of view. And I'm going to be fair or unfair with you and say, please get out of the offices, come to the field, and understand what is on the ground. I mean, I listen to you and you talk about there's not many people that can borrow $1 million in US terms, and my colleague Nick is here, we're in the same industry, is that the same sector, sorry, is that your $1 million that you're talking about is setting up 100 hectares of a macadamia field, just 100 hectares. It's equivalent to perhaps close to what's required to set up a macadamia cracking plant, drying plant, and so on. So the capacity is there. It's possible that in terms of opportunities, you are actually leaving opportunities on the table based on perceptions that might be existing about agriculture and the financing risk in agriculture. I'll tell you that at some point, I know of a company that actually set up significant hectares of trees on the basis of short-term financing. Took the short-term financing, and when it was time, as you always do, to say, we're calling for the money, simply said, let's get you on a plane and let's get you to the field. And the moment they got there to the field, the tenure was extended to 2 years because they saw what was there. I know from experience that we have taken senior bankers and even the central bank as well to a field where you then get surprised as to what is available. So when I look at it, Stanley and Liam, perhaps the opportunity for us that exists for us as partners is to actually find a way to demystify this risk, is to come together and actually have an opportunity where we take the bankers to the field to see that the opportunity is not just because we want financing, but because there's an opportunity for you as bankers to actually make money. If you come to the field and you see what is there in the field, perhaps your perceptions will change. That's my challenge to you as the bankers.
Thank you very much for that comment, sir. Appreciated. I'm sure the bankers had it for themselves. Before I get them to react, because they are itching to react, I would like just 2 more questions so that we can add to 1, 2.
Okay, thank you. So mine is a contribution as to why sometimes bankers face challenges in advancing or giving out loans to farmers, especially when the government had said we have a $20 million facility which is available for farmers to collect. In most cases, you'll find that the government would say this is a fund which is available, but the bank has to bear the credit risk. In the event that the farmer defaults, the bank has to pay back the funds to the fund manager or to the Reserve Bank or to the government. But you'll find that once the bank has been given such conditions, it means also when they are assessing the credit, it becomes also stringent, and you find that most of the farmers or the entrepreneurs will not be able to access those sort of loans. You'd find that yesterday, Speaker said the banks will be looking for so much collateral for a fund which has been availed by the government. It's because banks are also asked to carry the credit risk. In the event that the customer defaults, the bank has to pay the full amount to the government, but this was a fund which has been put aside to help farmers. So there is need to sort of have some sort of a risk sharing between the bank and the government, not that the bank should carry all the risks which are involved with that credit. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thanks a lot. I want to add to what Mr. Chinwera said, because there are two things that we know. Of developmental aspect to it. And then if you look at the Kenya Flower Council or the Kenya flower industry, the reason why they do have so much small-scale players in it, because it's because of financing from institutions like USAID. So what those guys have done is because the bank cannot give me because I don't have collateral, right? That's actually what happens. But for everyone who's actually here, who's actually done well, they've had to start from somewhere. Either they got funding from relatives or friends, those that were actually very lucky, So I do believe that, the developmental partners have got a role to play, which is actually to help individuals, the small scales, with actually funding, because if that were to happen, it can also help those individuals to create what I can term credit history. Because normally the bank is actually an institution that gives you an umbrella when it's actually, sunny, but it comes when it starts raining, they actually want to get back their umbrella, But what we are saying is, let's look at those issues. How do we also fit in developmental partners in this so that the small-scale farmers can create a credit history? Because when the banks come in, they actually see someone who's actually doing very well, but the developmental partners would actually set up the ground for that. So it's kind of like a challenge that I feel we also need to look at, because the Kenya Flower Council, they've actually done very well on that front. Thank you.
Thank you. So I get the sense that the comments that we got are from bankers, because I'm trying to understand why bankers are being defensive in their comments, but we're looking for solutions, right? We're looking for financial innovation so that we can offer a product that is not the usual, where someone just tells you, no, I want security or there's no lending. I think we've heard that before. We keep on hearing the story. But what can bankers do to do it differently so that we don't talk about the issues, or we've got a solution or a safeguard to the problems that we have? We have a problem of security. It's known. So what are the solutions? Maybe the bankers want to react to that.
Thank you so much. We have and are trying to do to respond to that in a way as an organization, as ZADT. Because with the funding which we have, which was at some time 40 million or 37.5, I've just rounded, which was contributed, like Gordon has said, by the development institutions, Danida being, 95% contributor to that fund. Obviously, we no longer have the 40 million. We have, if I round over, about 15 million, because a part of it we're lending in local currency, and with the devaluation now in this environment. So we no longer have that. But even with the little pocket that we have, I told you one of the things we used to do was to lend directly through the banks. But we have decided that as ZADT, one of our roles should be to test and pilot models and see with our own money. And if they work, we can then sort of seek opportunities for scaling up through funding from those that have the bigger pockets. Definitely, colleagues, I want to tell you that no institution will lend without collateral. There will always be collateral. In some cases, banks will tell you it's tangible. But in some instances, there may be no collateral. It doesn't mean that there is no collateral. But it is there, it is soft collateral. It has come through how the project has been structured. It has come through how the partners are linked. It has come through a culture. So in a culture where people don't default willingly, that becomes collateral in a way. That becomes something that mitigates risk. So I just want to say that the institutions don't lend without collateral. And ourselves from the development sector, we understand that. So we have set ourselves to sort of pilot. So in some cases, as I said, we train people, we capacitate through training, providing the skills, even the business skills that are required, so that when they take the proposal of, say, their business, it is something that the banks will understand. We also have realized that not everybody can borrow credit. So in some cases, we are using the little pot of funding that we have to provide equity so that we strengthen the balance sheet or create a history for them to be able to then approach financial institutions. So, well, I'm told time is up. But there are many models that we can talk about.
Thank you.
But that's our response to the question that you have asked.
Okay, thank you. I just have to give everyone a chance, and probably we need one round of questions. Look at her. She's lifting the orange, so.
Okay. Yeah, just some quick response and comments. To the brother at the front and to HDC, I think banks are very willing, especially to work with organized commodity associations. One of, I think, the means of trying to mitigate against this risk is that if you get a group of well-organized farmers who know what they are doing and have their case, so you are most welcome to come with your case to TDB and we would engage. Then another quick comment is the issue of justice. This is maybe an overall comment, but let me say, anyone who is talking about lending without putting land into the equation, I think to me, those are interim and temporary measures. Zimbabwe cannot afford to restore the value of its land to make it secure in terms of tenure. So at some point, I know this is going to be a long process. We may have all the other interim measures we are talking about, but ultimately, in most of the projects we do with the TDB, we end up having to talk to a president of the country in order to secure the tenure. So in most African countries, there's a structural deficiency of land tenure, which we cannot try to run away from. That needs to be fixed if we are to get institutional and serious money into banking. So in order to really get investment in that sector in the long run, we need to restore the value of our land into our balance sheet, as it is an important asset for this country. There's also always an issue of small scale. Zimbabwe is fortunate to have smallholder, large scale and medium. In the interest of technology and scales of economy, we also need a good balance. So whenever we are talking about smallholder, I like the smallholders, but we also need to talk about people who have the capital to attract new knowledge and technology, which will spill over to smallhold. And it's important in our debate that we have a fine balance of all the categories. Thank you.
So I'll just have two quick reactions, and we wrap up.
I'll make it very quick. All the comments, we're assuming that we're in a normal environment. So if you've read a book about banks or a normal macroeconomic environment, all the comments that were being made assume that. So let's understand our reality as Zimbabwe today. Okay? So Zimbabwe has got, we've got changes in both policy, macroeconomic policy, all sorts of policies, statutory requirements for banks. Those are changes in those statutory requirements. They occur at a higher degree and in more frequency in this country than in any other country in the world, right? So let's not, so it's difficult to talk about a 30-year money and 40-year money when you've got this short-term volatility that we have to deal with as financial institutions, okay? So with that, right, we also said that there is no codified fungibility in terms of changes of right of use of land in Zimbabwe. It's not codified. It exists, right, in forms of JVs, but it is not codified. So you can't take that right of use and go and raise collateral or capital to a financial institution on the back of that, right? So when we look at all this, we say to ourselves, what is actually working? What has worked? Let's look at examples of what worked, and let's follow the money in terms of where it's gone and what has worked. Right? Because it's not easy to have wholesale policy changes that we really want. Of course, we'd want our land to have collateral value from day one. It will unlock $25 billion tomorrow. But what is the likelihood of that happening tomorrow? It's very low. No, it's the reality. So that's all I need to say about that. Let's work with what already works, what's already in place, and let's leverage that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. In terms of capacity building, I think in terms of the rollout for Zimbabwe as a country, I think since time immemorial, there's been a lot of capacity building projects or initiatives towards horticulture production. I have two issues. Why then we think that there's no capacity building? Capacity building has been there, but the only problem is there's a tendency of poor adoption and inconsistencies of what would have adopted. So from a financial sector point of, from a lending point of view, bankers would want consistency. I'll think of my brother, you mentioned about smallholder farmers being high risk and all that. Yes, they've been capacitated, but if there's no record, if there's no information that shows that these farmers have been exporting, these farmers have been certified, there's consistency in the production or consistency in the activity within that industry, there's nothing to show. So there's no way we can still go back and capacitate and capacitate and capacitate when there's no adoption. So I think we have to work around adoption and consistency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Takendesa. Unfortunately, gentlemen and ladies, we're running out of time. We are in borrowed time right now, so we have to wrap up. But the discussion, obviously, and every time the discussion about money is exciting. I didn't see anyone dozing in the room here. So we thank you, our bankers. We thank you, the audience, and our bankers are still here. Those who still got questions that they need clarified, I'm sure they will meet and mingle with you outside, and you can ask your questions. It has been exciting for me.
Mr. Facilitator, you haven't given us time to do our parting shots. You have been... can I just say mine, please?
She will kill me.
Can I just say one? I am looking at the establishment of a horticultural fund, which will actually target the development of horticulture, facilitated by the council. We are ready to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure for me. I enjoyed this discussion before I came here. So I work with Simba. He didn't even teach me what to do, but I got excited. The discussions were lively. I appreciate the audience. Thank you very much for listening to the bangers. We have come to the end of the session. Thank you.
Pasat pani si visit agri upenyu idonga usingaite taka chingosunza chingobha chitambura singaite tairi
Thank you
but
very much.
tanga tisingakwanisi
And I'm
kuita
going
zvinobatika.
to just 1 minute before we go for lunch. So some interesting comments there. Something for the bankers to take home, which was I saw lots of farmers supporting, get out of the office and go to the fields. Whilst we were talking about financial innovations, I've got a little innovation to share with you before we go to lunch. And something that is very interesting about the agricultural sector is you see people coming together. It was very exciting. I went to the Zimtrade Exporters Awards, and it was exciting to see the tea clapping for the sugar. So that was absolutely interesting. Today, I would like to let you know about a little innovation in the form of a very energy efficient stove by an initiative being carried out by Northern Tobacco and Rift Valley. They have available and accessible to every farmer in the room today some energy efficient stoves that cut the use of firewood by 1/3. Each stove has the potential to save 1 hectare of, by 2/3, sorry, thank you, Liam. By 2/3. Each stove has the potential of saving 1 hectare of indigenous firewood per annum. The stove will be available for you to have a look at as you collect your plates at lunch. You can sign up, and if you have any further questions, I'm sure Liam will be able to assist, as well as Nick Shaxton from the avocado growers. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to keep you longer. I see people looking at me saying, when shall she let us go to lunch? It's lunchtime. Thank you.
Pasat pani si visit agri, upenyu do anga, singa itana chingo sunza, chingo